Hi, I'm Amanda Lamond, and today I am delivering a presentation called 9 Lessons for Creating a Life You Love in the Law. I've done versions of this talk over the last 5 years or so, many of them to different groups of students, and it used to be called Finding Your Path in the Law. But the longer I thought about that, the more I hated the title. It sounded cliched and it made me anxious, like I needed to stand up and somehow dispense wisdom that enabled all the students to be able to find the perfect career. So I've reworked it over the years and come up with a talk that I really enjoy sharing and that feels authentic and congruent with who I am and what I know. It's very unlike anything you're going to get from the University Careers Office, and it is unorthodox, but if you're open-minded, I believe this could change your life. Lesson 1 is to stop looking for your path. One of my favorite poems is by Joseph Campbell, and this line goes, "If you can see your path laid out in front of you step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path." Perhaps if you take away nothing else from today, it is just that you should stop searching for your path and realize that you'll be making it with every step you take. And there are no missteps, even the steps you think were missteps. In the end, you will look back at your life and you will know that it was all in divine order and there was a reason why you needed to make the mistake or fail or leave the job that you did. I find that students are very anxious about having their careers all figured out. They want a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and some even might admit that they want to have an idea of where they're going to be 20 years from now. But life doesn't work like that. It's very rare that people know where they're going to end up and actually end up there. Maybe that's 1%, maybe less. Like a girl who always knew she'd be a ballerina and actually becomes one. But even she doesn't know which ballet she's going to dance for or which country she may end up dancing in. So let's assume you're in the 99% of the population who has no idea where their career may take them, and start being okay with the not knowing. Start imagining your life as the most exciting TV series that is full of twists and turns. You can't guess ahead to what's going to happen in season 6 because guess what? The writers haven't written it yet. So the sooner you stop trying to figure it all out in advance, the sooner you can start enjoying the show. But telling you not to look for your path doesn't mean that you're off the hook here. I'm not telling you to sit back and enjoy the ride. Far from it, because the second lesson from today is that shit doesn't just happen. There's one thing I wish I'd known when I was 18, but maybe I wasn't ready to know it then. We continuously create our reality. So every single choice we make converts energy into matter. Our thoughts convert into form. And we conduct this alchemical ritual thousands, 100,000 times a day. Thoughts become things. So every single action we take is preceded by a thought. Our thoughts become our actions become our habits become our character, and our character becomes our destiny. Your subconscious mind is 30,000 times more powerful than your conscious mind. If you ever try to meditate, you'll know that your mind is never still. So where's it getting all these thoughts from? Sometimes it's our past, it's our upbringing, it's our culture. We are all sponges from a young age, sucking up all of these belief systems, many of which, maybe most of which, don't serve us. So we all have these self-limiting scripts running, like the "I'm not good enough" one, or "I don't belong," "I can't trust myself," "I can't trust others." You need to start becoming aware what's going on in there. I have a lot of resources that I can help you in other talks that I've done, but start by buying a book called The Untethered Soul. Become aware of your beliefs, your conscious beliefs and your unconscious beliefs. And remember that you are not your thoughts. You are aware of your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You feel your emotions. You are not your body. You have a body with which to experience the physical world. Here's a piece of Vedic philosophy. Now, the Vedanta or Vedic philosophy is from ancient India, And according to this ancient Indian philosophy, there are 3 qualities or psychological attributes. And each of us is made up of these 3 in varying quantities that are specific to us. So the first is tamas, which I call shit happens. And that's the kind of apathetic worldview where you think that, look, I'm not going to vote because I don't think my vote's going to count anyway. I'm not going to study because I think I'll fail anyway. Unfortunately, the majority of the world's population today is in this bracket of tamas, this feeling like the world just happens to me. I don't have really any power to change it. This is just how things are. A huge amount of apathy in the world today. The next type of quality or psychological attribute is the rajas energy. And in the rajas level, people believe I can do anything that I set my mind to. So it's about being driven and motivated. Unfortunately, having too much or only rajas energy can lead to huge amounts of egoism or egotism. So for example, Trump, where you believe that everything is within your power and you simply need to put your mind to it and work harder and you can do it. The third level or quality is sattva. And the sattva level is thy will be done. And that's about realizing that something greater than ourselves is actually in the driving seat and we do not get to control the whole world. So whether you believe that that is God or Allah or the universe, that's up to you. But at the level of sattva, we find balance and harmony and positivity. So each of us has these 3 energies in a specific sort of quantity or ratio that's unique to us. You can think about it. Are you mostly a shit happens type of person? Are you mostly I can do anything I put my mind to? Or are you mostly thy will be done? It's my experience that shit doesn't just happen. So if it's shit you don't want to happen, there's quite a lot you can do to avoid it. And if it's shit you want to happen, you need to believe it before it happens that you will see it. That's right. You need to believe it, then you will see it, and not the other way around. If you want to pass all your exams, but believe right now you probably will fail, you are probably going to be right. Your thoughts and actions and your belief systems will determine your reality. If you can shift your thought to, I'm probably not going to make it through this year unless I get help with taking notes or with this specific subject or with managing my anxiety or taking extra English lessons, then you will still probably be right that you won't make it without getting that help. But at least now you can take some actions that will change your likely experience. So what is the experience you want to have in the next few years? The best possible advice I could give you is to decide what you want, write it down, and then imagine the result of getting it. I mean, actually close your eyes and feel it. So don't just think about it. That's really important. You don't just think about it. You feel it in your body. So for example, you could feel yourself up on stage, accepting your degree. Imagine getting the great exam marks, seeing them, and how that feels in your body. Successful people succeed because they know what they want. They focus on particular goals and believe that they can accomplish things. So nothing is actually as important that you learn during your law degree as realizing that your thoughts will create your reality. Let's turn to lesson 3. A crisis is an opportunity. You may have heard it said before that the Chinese symbol for the word crisis is the same word symbol for opportunity. And that's no coincidence. The world that we have created is structurally and chronically, but not incurably, unsustainable. This was said in an extraordinary book called World Shift by a man called Irvin Laszlo. He has twice been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He's the founder and president of a whole lot of international think tanks. He's the author of 85 books, an extraordinary man. And he says that understanding what unsustainability means is not difficult. It just means a process or a condition cannot continue without change. So either it will change or it will break down. And right now, I'm sure you will all agree that we are living in a world which is structurally and chronically unsustainable. It's unsustainable in terms of the ecology and what we're doing to the planet. There is unsustainability in the economy. There is unsustainability in society generally in terms of the gap between rich and poor and the extraordinary number of people who live below the breadline. No access to resources. There is unsustainability in business practices, and there's unsustainability in politics. Unsustainability in the legal system. This is a photo of a huge firm called Dury and LeBeuf, which, as a result of globalization, sought to have offices in every corner of the globe. It got so big. They would boast, you know, we've even got offices in Uzbekistan, like you name the country, we've got an office there. But the vision and the values were not in place. So it was not sustainable and it blew up. In the end, the US managing partner and the UK managing partner weren't even speaking by the time things went south. And hundreds of thousands of lawyers lost their job. So we know that the world is in an unsustainable place. What do we do about it? Here are the timely change objectives, which are identified by Irvin Laszlo. He says that firstly, we need physical survival security. So we need to know we have a roof over our heads and that we can get food. Secondly, we need to ensure that there are stable interpersonal relations between people, because the amount of conflict in the world today and the growing number of wars, that's completely unsustainable. Thirdly, we need to create a meaningful social and cultural identity for people. And lastly, we need to create remunerated and socially useful employment. The third one, of course, is referring to the huge number of conflicts which arise as a matter of, you know, political differences, religious differences, etc. We don't respect each other's social and cultural identities. So these are the 4 timely change objectives. Now, I want you to think about which ones have something to do with lawyers. You probably have correctly identified that ensuring stable interpersonal relations is a huge part of what lawyers do. The legal system exists to help people get along with one another on our small blue planet. Whether it's family law or business law or tax law, criminal law, our role is managing conflict and interpersonal relations. It may be between individuals, it may be between people and corporations, or corporations and other companies, or it may be between countries. The next is the meaningful social and cultural identity, and we know there that human rights law exists to provide social and economic justice. So lawyers have a huge role to play in terms of the timely change objectives needed in the world today. There can be no doubt about that. But where do we start? It feels overwhelming. Well, we need to start by developing a profession of high-functioning lawyers who have beneficial relationships with each other, their clients, and their communities. Secondly, we need to develop self-aware lawyers who practice law mindfully and are dedicated to social and economic justice. And finally, we need lawyers who are leaders. Professor Susan Dykhoff is one of my heroes. She's a professor of law at Phoenix School of Law. She has a master's in clinical psychology, a law degree, and a master's in taxation, and a BA in mathematics. She has written the extraordinary book called Lawyer Know Thyself, about the psyche of the lawyer and the importance of lawyers understanding themselves. She explains that the legal profession is in crisis and describes it as a tripartite crisis. Number 1 is the poor public perception of lawyers. Number 2 is the high levels of incivility and aggression amongst lawyers. And number 3, the high levels of job dissatisfaction, which include substance abuse and very high depression rates. So these 3 things I sometimes reframe easily so that lawyers remember them. And I say, lawyers are not liked, they do not like each other, and they do not like themselves. That's being facetious, but we know that the legal profession is in crisis. And as the next generation of lawyers, you need to be aware of this before you enter the profession and start doing the work now to change it. The most extraordinary guide that can help you is the book Lawyers as Change Makers, which is a guide to the global integrative law movement. My friend and the author of this book, Kim Wright, asks, what is your part of transforming the world? If litigation is what makes your soul sing, do it where you will make the most difference. Fight the bad guys, whoever they are, in your value system. If you prefer to make peace, do that too. Do what is true to your heart, but do something that matters to you and to the planet. It doesn't have to be huge, but change is urgent. It is time to wake up. This is why we were born. This is why you went to law school. The world needs saving, and you're the one. Lesson 4, know when it's worth fighting the system. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. There is a lot within the legal profession that is going to drive you crazy and that needs a lot of fixing. But you really do need to become aware of when it is worth fighting the system so that you don't burn out fighting things that aren't ready to shift and change yet. And that realize when it would be better serve the interests of change to develop a new model, which makes the existing model obsolete. If you want to know about all the new models that are being developed in the legal system, you need to learn about the integrative law movement. It's an international movement in law, and there are many names and models within it. So it's a kind of umbrella term for all these different developments. There are about 50 areas that I could tell you about. The most shocking thing is that chances are you won't have heard of about 80% of them. Why? Because law schools haven't kept up. You're probably at a good law school, but the problem is that things are changing fast. You know that cell phones are becoming outdated every 3 to 5 years and that the tech now doesn't even work with the apps, so you have to keep upgrading. Well, law schools don't change their syllabus every few years, so they don't actually include what is happening in the world now, and that's problematic. Luckily, you have this great thing called the internet, and you don't need a professor for this. You can get online, you can teach yourself. And now, since this period of lockdown and the COVID-19 crisis, there is even more available online and for free everywhere in the world. I just got off a call earlier and heard that my colleague and the author of Lawyers as Changemakers and Lawyers as Peacemakers has been teaching her conscious contract work online. There is so much happening online, and as I said earlier, so much of it is free. So there is no excuse not to learn what you need to know. There's so much stuff: conflict coaching, collaborative law, community law, drug courts, therapeutic jurisprudence, proactive law, values-based contracts, holistic litigation, transformative media. So many exciting developments, and you will find one, I'm quite sure, the one that makes your heart sing. There are a whole lot of books that are available. You probably have to look at Amazon or Loot and see what you can find, or there are Kindle versions available online. So Lawyer Know Thyself, you'll see there, the Mediation Field Guide, The New Lawyer, Lawyers as Peacemakers, Challenging Conflict, The Happy Lawyer, Relationship-Centered Lawyering. There's a whole world out there for you to discover that you're not going to learn about at university. Lesson 5, the only role you need to play is you. It's easy to get anxious when you keep focusing on what other people are doing and achieving. If you hang out on LinkedIn or Facebook, you may become overwhelmed by the successes of others. So it's a really important lesson, and one that so many people struggle with, to know that the only role you need to play is you. You might see someone post that they spoke to an audience of 500, and you think to yourself, I could never do that. But what you don't see is the path they took to get there, or the obstacles they climbed over. Maybe the fact that that person was on their knees vomiting in terror minutes before their talk started. We think when people post things on social media that it all looks so easy and that it's only hard for us. It couldn't be further from the truth. So when I do interviews with lawyers now, my main aim is to get them to take off that professional mask and talk about what it's really like underneath. I'm going to share stories with you about people who found their role playing themselves. And I focused on women because I believe that women don't receive as much press as men do for their achievements. In America, they have something called the American Bar Association Journal, which gives out awards called the Legal Rebel Awards. They're given to lawyers who are breaking new ground in a variety of different ways, pioneering new opportunities, paths, and projects in the law. I think it's the most fantastic initiative. And every year, the prize winners of the Legal Rebel Awards get a certain thing. So in this particular year, they all got a skateboard. And you can see there's a lawyer in the front and in the background with the skateboard. One year it was caps, another year sneakers. I don't know. They seem to come up with something different every year. A lot of the lawyers that I hugely admire are lawyers who have won the Legal Rebel Award. So first up is Pauline Tesler, who has become an expert in neuroliteracy for lawyers. So she teaches lawyers about things like what happens to the brain during conflict and what happens to the brain during negotiation. It's really fascinating. I'm very proud to say that I brought Pauline Tesler to South Africa in 2013 so that she could train the first lawyers here, both in neuroliteracy and in something called collaborative divorce, which is when each person who's divorcing, each of the partners has their own lawyer and they each have a coach. And they sign an agreement that they will not go to court. And so if agreement can't be reached, everybody will resign from that team and the parties have to start again. And they do this so that the threat of going to court, which is always prevalent in divorce proceedings, even when people are trying to mediate, that is taken off the table. And this whole model was developed because there's the recognition that the couple doesn't get stuck on the legal issues, they get stuck on the emotional ones. And so it only makes sense to have coaches who are trained in helping people through emotional difficulties be part of that process and not leaving that work to the lawyers who, as you know, are not trained in helping clients with any of their emotional difficulties, although they should be, in my opinion. So in addition to Pauline Tesler, the next lawyer up is Linda Alvarez, who has written a book called Conscious Contracts. She does work with companies where she makes each company look at what their values and vision are, and from that place decide whether they still want to enter into contracts with each other. She's also a Legal Rebel Award winner, an extraordinary woman who used to run a circus and only became a lawyer in her 40s. Another amazing lawyer is Patrice Perkins, who runs a business called Creative Genius Law. She has a clientele composed of event planners and graphic artists and food truck vendors, and says that traditional networking events don't work for her. She says, I know for sure that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and that my vision is larger than life. But being in a traditionally conservative industry, I had moments of uncertainty early on. I wasn't sure how I'd be received by my peers. There were two moments that caused a shift for me and led to me letting go of inhibitions around not having a traditional law practice. Back in 2012, I met an attorney at least 30 years my senior at a large conference who stopped to check out my information table. She told me that she wished she had the gall to step out and do work as cool and true to self as I was when she was back in her heyday. And then the second moment that helped me was when I took the Fascination Advantage personality assessment, because the results stated that I am naturally a trendsetter and an innovator, and that I have a knack for helping others identify what's next. It confirmed that everything I developed so far with my firm was authentic to who I truly am. I may have cried at the results. So you may want to Google Patrice Perkins or Legalese, which is a new company, well, it was new a year or two ago, doing similar work in South Africa. Who's up next? Famke Vedekop. She is a Dutch lawyer who's become a friend of mine. I met her, there I am on the far right, wearing a kind of pink tank top, meeting with lawyers from lots of different countries, and that was in Amsterdam in 2014. What a privilege. Famke has become an expert in the rights of the planet, and then helping ecocide be declared a crime against humanity. So basically destroying the earth is a crime against humanity. It's an extraordinary kind of new area of law, and if you are interested in doing work to save the planet, you need to look up Famke, and she'd be happy to chat to you. I've already asked. And by the way, she ran away from law and became a sort of journalist on the side doing interviews for people, and it was when she interviewed someone who was an earth lawyer that she found her calling and returned to law. Rhiannon Thomas is also a friend of mine. She practices law in a way that's very unique to her. For example, she has worked with people from hospice on a process for drawing up wills for people who are dying and how to help lawyers work with the hospice people. She has also worked with a psychologist to develop a process for antenuptial contracts, which is a really humane and like conscious process, because mostly what she found is that the process that lawyers use for antenuptial contracts is so horrific that a couple who are about to get married go into the office and the process involves looking at what's going to happen when one of you dies or when you want to get divorced. And many lawyers handle it quite badly, and it's ends up being a really, heartbreaking and horrible experience to have an antenuptial contract drafted instead of, a grounding and humanizing and necessary part of entering into a lifelong commitment. So Rhiannon brings a huge sense of who she is and her values to all the work that she does. Another lawyer is Janelle Orsi, who's pioneered a whole new area of law called practicing law in the sharing economy. So if you're interested in completely new areas of law because people live in community and they want to share things, you can look at Janelle Orsi's book. Then there's Robert DeRoy, who pioneered comic contracts in this country. So you'll see the picture here on the right, which is a picture of his comic contract, which was for farm workers. And it's done for workers who are largely illiterate, or for many of us, even the legalese makes legal contracts impenetrable. And there's a huge amount of injustice in that when people are bound by a contract that they don't even understand. So he has been pioneering the way with comic contracts and won many awards for his work. He's also South African and was at the University of Cape Town. Then there's Gerald Abila. He is in Uganda. He started a business called Barefoot Law, an online nonprofit, and using Facebook and Skype was able to provide legal services to very poor people in Uganda. There are so many opportunities, and maybe just seeing what these people are doing will spark in you the belief that the world is your oyster, that you don't have to look at what's already been tried and tested. You can follow whatever it is that makes your heart come alive. Cormac Cullinan is an earth lawyer in South Africa. He's regarded as an extraordinary leader in loads of parts of the world and is invited to speak at conferences all over. And yet the extraordinary thing is that barely anybody in South Africa has heard of this extraordinary lawyer. So sometimes you unfortunately can't be a prophet in your own city, they say. It takes people in other parts of the world to recognize your genius. And finally, this bankruptcy lawyer who I read about somewhere, and at night he's an energy healer, and then by day, this is him being an energy healer with all these like crystals and strange things on his desk, and then by day he's a bankruptcy lawyer. And I just love the fact that you don't have to limit yourself to being this or that. You can be both. Lesson 6. You are special and different. And that means your path will be unique. I asked these legal professionals at a conference that I held with Kim Wright, the author of Lawyers as Peacemakers, who's standing there in front of the blackboard. I held this conference with her, with a small group of lawyers when she came to South Africa upon my invitation in 2015. Oh, it was much earlier than that, actually. It was a few years before that, 2012 maybe. And we asked this group of lawyers to find one word each to sum up their purpose. I want to give you a moment to think about what word you might use. Do you have a word? Don't panic if you don't. I didn't think that I did until Kim made me answer and the word flew out of my mouth, and my word was integrate. My entire life is about integration, but that's a subject for another talk. So remember, these lawyers are all lawyers who'd been in the profession in different capacities for a long time, so they had found their purpose. For those of you who are still studying, it may yet take a while, and your purpose may change. Don't waste time searching for it. Keep on doing the things that make you come alive, and your purpose will find you. There's too much emphasis these days of you must find your purpose, you must find your purpose, and people feeling like they've somehow failed if they haven't. So while I want to talk to you about this because it's fascinating, and I'm going to show you the next slide, which will show you the different purposes that these lawyers identified, don't feel that you should have everything completely clear at this stage of your career and journey. So these are the words that we wrote. Here's an actual photograph of the words that the lawyers in the room came up with. So there's my word, integration. Then we had balance, safe, voice, integrity, boto, which is another word for being human, non-violence, lawgiver, curiosity, facilitation, fairness, justice, being, truth, process, honor, clarity, change, authentic, enlighten, teach, listen, difference. It's really interesting when you look at all of those words together and how they make up the values of what I think the legal profession should be. So some things to think about when you are trying to determine your direction that you want to go in the law, your job. What are your roles in the family? Your culture, your history. What entertainment do you enjoy? Your physical appearance. How are you known? What are your expectations of the world? What are your attitudes towards things? What are your habits? What are your beliefs? What do you know to be true? What are your values? Start interrogating this stuff. Play with it. Have fun. And when you sort of think about these things, this isn't necessarily about the future you're creating. It's about what are you already doing, because the future will emerge from that. I love this Venn diagram. It shows in the middle where all of these 4 circles intersect is your evolutionary purpose. So what we are all looking for, the ideal, would be where what you love, what you do well, what the world will pay for, and what the world needs all intersect. It's one of my favorite Venn diagrams, and I keep this one up on my notice board. Remember, you need to do what excites you. In some environments, it can be tricky to uncover your authentic self. I found this on some website several years ago, and I've used it in a lot of talks, and I have to admit I never got any sort of copyright permission to use this. But when I look at this picture, there's something in my heart that just sinks. This very white firm with everybody wearing matching outfits. But most of all, my heart sinks when I look at these, I think, candidate attorneys who are perched on the sofa with their legs at the same angle and the peep-toe shoes. They're clones of each other, and they are being encouraged to be clones. And I just think how very difficult it is to find your authentic self if you're working in a space like this. So just be aware that some of you may choose to do articles in firms that are, let's say, a little stifling. And you need to be aware of how you're going to support yourself and your own authenticity during that time. Things are changing and firms are different. And even if you walk into, I think most of South Africa's firms today, you're not going to see this. But they are still, even a few years ago, I remember being told at a firm that you could have one photograph on your desk and the dimensions could be this big and that big, and it could only be a photo of this, that, or the other thing. And if you had any inspiring photos up in your office, they had to be of this type or the other. So, you know, there are still some quite restrictive environments. So just be aware that it may be a necessary stepping stone that you go into an environment that is going to curtail who you are a little, but think of how you're going to support yourself during that period and in what spaces you will be able to be your authentic self so that you don't shrivel completely during that process. And that's just to zoom in on those poor candidate attorneys and that very smug looking man in the center. Right, lesson 7, don't be a lady. You might wonder why I'm saying that. Whatever you choose, however many roads you travel, I hope that you choose not to be a lady. I hope you will find some way to break the rules and make a little trouble out there. And I also hope that you will choose to make some of that trouble on behalf of women. For so long, there has been this emphasis on girls, being good, and that women need to behave in a certain way. And I think that that is being eroded and broken all the time. I mean, I went to a school where you were encouraged to be a lady and wear your skirt a certain length and your hair had to be a certain way and your hairband had to match and a whole lot of other rules beside. And I found it excruciating, and I've spent a long part of my life rebelling against that and then trying to recover from where the rebellion got me. So I don't believe we need to be ladies anymore. The best book that I can guide you to in that respect is an extraordinary and beautiful and amazing book about a woman's own life. Her name is Glennon Doyle, and the book is called Untamed. And you can look up online, there's some talks about her, talking about the book, but I can't suggest highly enough that you go and buy Untamed and learn how to untame yourself. The most notable fact that our culture imprints on women is a sense of our limits. The most important thing a woman can do for another is to illuminate her actual possibilities. When I started my legal career back in 2004, I was acutely aware of my limits. I did articles in a big firm and I suffered from enormous anxiety. I compared myself all the time to lawyers who'd been practicing for years, and I felt like I didn't know anything. And although I had some mentors in the firm, I didn't have really many women mentors, just a few. And they weren't really practicing law in a way that felt congruous to who I am. I didn't have women that I could talk to about the inner experience of practicing law and trying to create a career that felt authentic to me. So there was help with the external parts of the journey, like how to draft a contract, etc., but no help with the internal stuff. And I felt really lost. I knew I could play the game, but that being a big firm lawyer wasn't who I really am. So I ended up leaving after I qualified. And I went to run a college for students from townships straight after articles. And that's where I discovered you can find work that resonates with your soul. I did a bunch of different things over the next decade, which is, again, a very long story for another talk. It's been an interesting ride. But eventually I found that I was able to use my tough experiences, all of them along the way, to help others. And that all the experiences I had had as a lawyer, I was finally able to use to help others. This is me at a conference that I was so excited to finally hold. I didn't know that I'd had this dream inside me for so long. The conference was called Finding New Ways for Women to Lead in Law, and it was in 2015. So by that stage, I was ready to make some trouble on behalf of women, as the quote earlier alludes to. So I pulled together this conference. I was ready to be a public rebel and to say what I wanted to say about the legal profession. I was also 7 months pregnant. You can't entirely see it from this photo, but if I was standing sideways, you would notice I had a very large bump. So I did this conference my way, and I cried. I even cried on stage, because 10 years before this conference, I was a candidate attorney having panic attacks in the parking lot. And now I got to stand on a stage and make space for the stories about women that I think need to be told. And it was like being given the chance to hold the hands of every woman there who might be feeling I'm not enough, and to say, you are, you've got this. I cried when I read the conference reviews, and I've saved all of them. And I went on to hold another 4 conferences for women lawyers. And that brings me to the next lesson. Lesson number 8, you are going to fail. So I don't mean this to sound harsh, but it is a reality. You are going to fail at something in the next few years. Maybe you've already failed at something. Maybe it's going to be a test, maybe an exam. Maybe you'll fail at a relationship. Maybe you'll fail at a new sport. Maybe you'll fail at getting your driver's license. by the way, I had to get people to parallel park my car for me the first 3 months that I was at UCT, because all the parallel parking is on the wrong side because they're one-way roads. So I would find my parking spot and then get out and flag down another student to park my car. How embarrassing is that? However, how I got the license, I don't know, but onwards and upwards, I did eventually learn to parallel park. So failure is a given. Yet weirdly, we're not taught about failure. Everyone keeps talking about how to succeed. But for anyone who strives to achieve, it is inevitable that somewhere along the line you'll fail. And how you cope with this will determine your success. So you need to figure out a strategy to deal with failure. And I don't mean going out to get trashed with your friends. In a perverse way, I like to talk about failure because it's so uncomfortable. And I like to know that I'm growing. And when things are uncomfortable, I know I'm growing. At the great age of 42, I have finally learned that I am at my most powerful when I am vulnerable. So I'll share with you 2 stories of failure. In my first year at law school, I was on the Dean's Merit List for academic performance. During my previous degree, I'd also been on the Dean's Merit List for academic performance every year. But I partied hard, and I had a substance abuse problem. And my second year of law school, I spent mostly in rehab. It was deeply shaming that I had to drop out of a whole lot of courses. I had to get repeats for exams, and in the end dropped an entire year. So then I had to join the year below me, which filled me with shame. But actually, getting clean and putting down drugs and stopping drinking at the age of 24 was hands down the best thing I have ever done, and it has made the biggest contribution to what I feel is now my successful life. It started me on a process of self-discovery and a spiritual journey for which I am beyond grateful. And if things hadn't got that bad, I wouldn't ever have been forced to change and do the soul searching that I did then. My second so-called failure is the conference that I held in 2017, last of my Finding New Ways for Women to Lead in Law. I got the most extraordinary speakers from different countries in the world who flew, paying for themselves because the budget was so small. They flew to South Africa so that they could speak at my conference. I had lots of people say to me, I don't even know how you did that. What is it that made these people jump on a plane and fly to speak at your conference at their own expense? One of my coups was getting the new Constitutional Court Justice, Leona Turon, who's pictured here, to speak at the conference. And she spoke so beautifully and movingly and amazingly. But it was sort of during quite a big financial recession. And a lot of the firms I thought would sponsor the conference said that they no longer had marketing budgets and sponsorship budgets that year, even though they'd sponsored the previous year. So my projections of what would come in were really off. Also, a lot of people who wanted to attend the conference said that they weren't able to. I got so many emails saying, I want to come, but I can't afford to. The night of this conference, which was such an extraordinary achievement, I got home and to my hotel room in Joburg, and there was a small tax bill that I had to pay, and I realized that I had about 500 Rand in my account. 500 Rand. Having put on this extraordinary conference, a Cape Town one, a Johannesburg one, all these people flew in, and I was broken. I sat there and sobbed. I was like, what have I done wrong? But I have to say that I have learned a huge amount, and it's taken a lot of work to separate the success of that event from the financial failure of the event. And that I needed to realize that it wasn't all about making money. It did feel quite, as I said, soul destroying to not make any money, but I learned some valuable lessons. Henry Ford said that one who fears failure limits his activities. Failure is only the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Winston Churchill said that stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm, and sometimes I think that's been my path. But I'm serious. Who are you going to turn to when you fail at something? Make sure that you've got a support team in place because you will fail. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. Lesson number 9. Life is not a journey. A lot of people talk about this journey that we're on. It's easy to refer to it as such because we hear that everywhere. Currently, you're on some part of your journey that's going to give you the right to put a few letters after your name when you qualify. But it was a British philosopher that lived in the 70s called Alan Watts who helped me look at things differently, and maybe it can help you too. Here's a picture of Alan Watts, and you can Google him because there's actually quite a few. I've seen some YouTube videos and various things about him, and he's amazing to listen to. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. He talks about the fact that life isn't a journey. He says, the weird thing about life is it's all graded. What we do is put the child into the corridor of this grading system, and we kind of say, come on, kitty, kitty, and then you go into kindergarten, and then that's great, and when you finish, you get into first grade, and then we say, come on, because first grade leads to second grade, and then you get out of grade school, and you get high school, and it's revving up, this whole thing that's kind of coming, and then you go to college, and then you've got graduate school, and then when you get through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you might be doing something like selling insurance, and you've got a quota to make, and you hope you're going to make that. And all the time you think, there's this next thing coming, and it's coming. This thing, the success that you're working for is going to come. And then you wake up one day when you may be about 40 years old, and you say, my God, I've arrived. I'm there. And yet you don't feel very different from what you've always felt. But you've wasted all this time wishing you were someplace else. What says that thinking of life as a journey can mean that we cheat ourselves the whole way down the line? Because it reinforces the idea that we are trying to get somewhere, someplace other than here. Without even knowing it, it's like our whole lives become about a destination that we never reach. This idea is something that I want to do a separate talk on because I've been mulling it over in my mind for the last couple of weeks. This notion of all the lawyers, or so many of them, women lawyers that I've worked with over the years who strove to make a partner and then got there. And then they realized there was no there. There was this idea that when they'd reached this pinnacle of success, that all their dreams would come true and they'd suddenly feel, validated and important and powerful and have everything they wanted. And the reality is so often is opposite. And so I want you to really think about this thing of the journey and think about where it is you're trying to get to, and is that precluding you from being present now? The problem with waiting for some other time is that you miss the present. And it's very sad to not be present where you are in this extraordinary gift that you have, this extraordinary one life. We also don't know how long we've got. And so if you are sacrificing everything now in favor of some future existence, there's a possibility you don't get there. And that would be immensely sad. So I want you to think differently about being present to now and not striving always that when I get my degree, when I've done articles, when I, and know that you're not unusual in that. It is the nature of the ego. It's part of the human experience that your ego is permanently unsatisfied. So trust that you are where you're meant to be. And as Watts encourages us, he says, look at life like it's a piece of music, because you don't play a piece of music to get to the end of it. Because if you did, he says, then the best conductors would be those who played the fastest. And it's the same with dancing. You don't dance, he says, to get to the other side of the room. You dance to experience the dance. The whole point of dancing is the dance. So trust that you are offering yourself to the world every day in small conversations and in every encounter. The bigger picture does not need to be clear for you to walk or keep walking. You are not stationary. Like a car driving in the dark, you need only see the next few meters to proceed, not the entire path that you are yet to travel. I hope that some of these lessons, or at least one of them, has landed with you today. Stop looking for your path. Shit doesn't just happen. A crisis may just be an opportunity. Know when it's worth fighting the system and when not. The only role you need to play is you. You are special and different. Don't be a lady. You are going to fail. Life is not a journey. Let's collectively take a deep breath and let go of some of that rajas energy. I have to figure everything out. I have to turn my mind to this. I can do it. Me, me, me. And embrace your sattva energy. The energy of asking, dear universe, show me just the next step that I should take so that one day I may be of service in the law. And that, my dear friends, is how you create a life you love in the law.